Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening to all. I hope you all are safe and well. Since COVID-19 brought us a lot of difficulties, but this tradition of webinar is one of the good things which we have inherited from the COVID season, although things are getting better, but the unfeasibility of face-to-face sessions has made us adapt to this practice of quick learning, and we all are appreciative of that. In that regard, the Department of Aerospace Sciences and Strategic Studies at A University has been engaging itself with a lot of research-based activities, and this webinar is also a part of that series. So we welcome you all. Today we are joined by an esteemed panel of experts on the topic of emerging technologies and its impacts on strategic stability. So this is the topic which we are going to talk about today. Today we are joined by the panelist, which I should be introducing first. So first of all, we are here with Ms. Amna Rafiq. She is working as a research associate in the Arms Control and Disarmament Center at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. Previously, she has worked with Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs, Directorate of Strategic Plans Division SPD, and Pakistan Institute for Parliamentary Services, Islamabad. As a young parliamentary subject expert, she also assisted the Senate's Standing Committee on Defense Production at the Parliament of Pakistan. Ms. Rafiq holds an MPhil degree in International Relations from Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. She has completed her BS Honors Politics and International Relations from International Islamic University, Islamabad, with gold medal distinction and first position. Her fields of interest include cyberspace, emerging technologies, arms control, and disarmament. Ms. Amna Rafiq, we welcome you and we are grateful that you have joined us to talk on this topic today. Our second panelist is nonetheless is equally an esteemed panelist. She is Ms. Shaza Arif, and she's a researcher at the Center of Aerospace and Security Studies, Islamabad. She has secured a gold medal in BSc Honors, Defense and Diplomatic Studies from Fatima Jinnah Women University, Rawalpindi. Her areas of interest include emerging technologies. She has contributed book chapters, research papers, and opinion articles in national and international platforms. She presented Pakistan at an international workshop titled Commonwealth Future, Reimagining Peace at Durban University of Technology, South Africa in March of 2020. The third panelist is an asset of the department. He is Mr. Shayan Hassan Jami, which is currently an MS Scholar of Strategic Studies at Department of Aerospace Sciences and Strategic Studies, A University. He holds a bachelor's in computer science from NUST and has also completed an internship at the Arms Control and Disarmament Center at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. He has written articles and issue briefs on topics ranging from artificial intelligence to nuclear proliferation to US foreign policy, and his research areas includes emerging technologies, AI, artificial intelligence, and global power competition. So I warmly welcome you all, and we would like to convene today's webinar with our first panelist, Ms. Amna Rafiq. So Ms. Amna Rafiq, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. First, I'm grateful to Dr. Adil Sultan for this opportunity, and thank you, Aisha, for your kind introduction. As assigned that I'm going to speak on the issue of current landscape of emerging technologies and impact on the strategic stability for the next 15 to 20 minutes. Here is the sequence of my presentation. I have divided my presentation into three main sections. In the first section, I will talk about the concept of the emerging technologies, because defining the term emerging technology is extremely important because every day we are seeing like there are a lot of new technologies coming in, but every technology is not an emerging technology. And in order to qualify an emerging technology, the technology must possess certain features. So I will discuss briefly those features, and then I will provide a list of top 10 emerging technology. In the second section, I will focus on the current landscape of emerging technologies. What are the global emerging trends, and the orientation of great powers. Lastly, I will address the main theme, which is the impact of these emerging technologies on strategic stability, how it will affect the arms race stability and the crisis stability, and the concept of the mutually assured destruction. So moving on to the first section, that is the emerging technologies. So as I said that every day there is a new technology, but every technology is not an emerging technology. So we can define emerging technology as a set of radically developing coherent and novel technologies with the ability to produce prominent effects. These technologies not only have the potential to alter the institutional frameworks and set of stakeholders, but also the nature of interactions among them. The true potential of their impact remains ambiguous due to their manifestation in near future. So from this, you can see there are approximately 6 defining features. First is the radical development. Second is coherence. Third is the capability to produce prominent effects. Fourth feature is the potential to alter the institutional framework and set of stakeholders. And then the fifth feature is that their impact remain ambiguous. And fourth, the last one is their manifestation in the near future. So it is important to just understand that emerging technologies are quite different from new technologies, because at a certain time a technology is an emerging technology, but once we start experiencing their impacts in the present in present, and they are no longer ambiguous, they become a new technology, and there will be some other technology which will replace this emerging technology. So here is the list, from the various reports of the United Nations and the US Congressional Services. I have made this list. This list is debatable, so if anyone have a disagreement over the list, that is debatable. So the first technology is the robotics and drones. Second is the artificial intelligence. Third is the quantum technologies. Fourth is the electromagnetic and directed energy weapons. Then we have biotechnology. We have missile technologies, and cyber information and communication technologies. Then we have advanced outer space technologies, advanced chemicals, and lastly the material technology. So what about the current landscape? In my personal opinion, this current landscape, as well as in the future, we are heading towards a global tech war, where there would be a re-emergence of great power competition, especially with reference to the emerging technologies. Then majority great powers, as well as other developing countries, are trying to uniform and rapid inclusion of these technologies into national security capabilities at all levels. Then there is a ongoing global debate on the standardization of these emerging technologies, and we can clearly see a divide among the major powers. Like there are two groups, one group led by the US and the Western powers, and then there is another group led by Russia and China. And there is a stark difference between their official positions regarding what kind of standards should be there, and what are the global norms of the emerging technologies. Especially US and the West want to have the same existing international system, and they are talking about the automatic application of the existing system on emerging technologies. However, on the other hand, The Chinese and the Russians say that there is no such thing like automatic applications, and we should revise or reform or in fact establish or design new global norms for these emerging technologies. So in various reports, US is trying to develop an overarching global strategy for military use of these technologies, and it is trying to connect all the cooperative initiatives of US allies across the globe, and especially focusing on European Union, NATO, and Indo-Pacific region. And US is also planning to appoint a new technology advisor to the US president and establishment of a White House-led technological council to oversee the implementation. And in various reports, the higher officials and key institutions of the US categorically mentioned that US must try to offset this China's digital Silk Road and Belt and Road initiative. And here are some examples of the global collaborations US is pursuing to offset the domination, or we can say the edge of China in the field of emerging technologies. The first one is the CNP. Its scope is global. It is focusing on the development of critical infrastructure, then protection and openness, intellectual property rights issues. Then second initiative is the initiative of United Kingdom that includes top 10 democracies of the world, including India, US, UK, Canada, South Korea. Then we have France, Germany, Australia, Japan, and Italy. So they are mainly focused to redesign the global supply chain management. Again, they are focusing on emerging technologies. The third and very important collaboration or the alliance is among US, India, and Israel. It was announced back in September 2020, and we can say that there is a one part which is developing in Indo-Pacific region, and in my opinion, this would be a Western technological quad which is developing at the Western end. So they are basically focusing on the reliability and interoperability of these emerging technologies with a special focus on 5G technologies. Another important development in this domain, and it is going to directly impact Pakistan as well, is the US-India Strategic Tech Alliance. Basically, US is trying to build minilateral relationships between India and other Quad members in the areas of emerging technologies. Few of the examples are India and Australia entered into a cyber and critical technology partnership, and then India and Japan are coming up with memorandum of cooperation for information and communication technologies. So to sum up this entire landscape, in my personal opinion, there are three underlying themes. First is building a coalition of coalitions. Like US, one coalition in the Indo-Pacific, then one in South Asia, one in the Middle East, and then Europe, and then at the end combining all these global partnerships to achieve the technological interoperability as well as to dominate the data sharing ecosystem. The main focus is that like after 10 to 12 years, if there emerges a situation where they have to enter into a direct military conflict with any of their rivals, then all their military equipments must be compatible with each other. So moving on to the last section, that is the impact on strategic stability. It is basically difficult. There is a difficulty and ambiguity and uncertainty that surrounds these emerging technologies. So understanding the interdependence and the patterns of interaction between strategic stability and the emerging technology is a complex thing. So in my opinion, we can predict to a certain extent that how and when the consolidation of these technologies will take place, but it is clear that it is not going to be a smooth sailing. So militarization of these technologies will further add to the security complexities at the global as well as at the regional level. So when we talk about the strategic stability, it is basically a stable deterrence relation in which neither party perceives or have an advantage of altering its force posture due to fear that an opponent might use weapons first during the crisis situation. So there are three main elements of strategic stability, namely like arms race stability, we have crisis stability, and then the deterrence stability. So talking about the arms race stability, with the rapid modernization of the military, especially in the field of emerging technologies, like major powers are investing and forming these partnerships in the field of AI, big data, 5G. So the future of arms race stability is not that much bright, and it will not only push the great powers as well as other states, small states, to invest in these technologies as well. So in addition to the development of the automated systems, the integration of AI with the existing weapon system is another concern which will affect the strategic stability, especially when it comes to the command and control systems. So it is really important to define the contours of human-machine interactions, and different levels of human control is really crucial. Keeping human in the loop is the must condition. So secondly, these space platforms, autonomous weapon system and swarming could extremely vulnerable to the electromagnetic warfare, cyber attacks, hacking, takeover, reprogramming, and jamming. And so it would be really difficult to assess that these weapon systems are operating as programmed or there is some kind of interference, and we should take into account, as I already mentioned, that electromagnetic interference by the third party, because the third party may try to produce conflicting results, and therefore leading to an unforeseen complexity, especially when it is hard to prove that any intrusion happened by the third party or a spoiler. Talking about the sea-based deterrence or the future of sea-based deterrence, with the consolidation of these emerging technologies, oceans will become transparent. Currently, it is not impossible, but it is difficult to detect submarines. But AI-enabled naval ships and submarines would be able to detect nuclear submarines with better speed and accuracy. So although this technology will take some years to mature, but once operationalized, it will have a destabilizing effect on the credible second strike capability. And when AI and hypersonics will enter the battlefield, states would be fighting at machine speeds. So the fast speed lies at the core of these emerging technologies. The belief to destroying enemy at machine speed will create a sense of superiority in technologically advanced states, which can result in preemptive strikes. We can clearly see this false sense of superiority and escalation control in India. Indian Army Chief clearly expressed the Indian aspirations in this regard. He said, and I quote, that the Balakot airstrike saw these short, intense escalatory cycles of military activity in full media glare, where sophisticated information narratives played an equally important role. So if you play the escalatory game with skills, military ascendancy can be established in short cycles of conflict that do not necessarily lead to war. And technology is really important in this regard. Technology is also tipping doctrinal cycles, as doctrines are now chasing technology. So this last aspect is very important. The relation between military technologies and doctrines is a debate, which requires, in my personal opinion, it requires another event. But this statement highlights the significance of information warfare and impact of these technologies on strategic stability. So to conclude, I would summarize my entire presentation in three main points. The first is that the conceptual and technical clarity vis-a-vis emerging technology is really important, and it should be taken into account by the students, experts, and policymakers. Secondly, great power competition is re-emerging. The focus of the new Cold War will be on emerging technologies. Friendly states are focused on dominating the global supply chains, design the legal and the normative order for emerging technologies that suits their national interest or international interests of their allies. And this global tech war will result in arms race and frequent crises among state and deterrence instability. So I will end my presentation here, and I look forward to an interesting question and answer session. Back to you, Aisha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amna. So this was quite an insightful beginning, and the way you introduced the era of technology for us, and the way you started that how not every technology can be a game changer technology or a technology which might bring us the world towards further instability in the terms of strategy. So first you introduce what technological advancements could be and how those technological advancements, some of them could be a challenge for the strategic stability. And then you also highlighted that how US national security right now adds up to all these threats and how they are highlighting that what technologies with China or other their rivals are engaging upon and how this could be changing the balance of strategic stability for the world. So thank you so much for these insights. And to look at this world where all of the strategic partners are standing right now at the precipice of technological era, we move forward towards our next participant, which is Ms. Sheza Arif. And Ms. Sheza is a researcher at Center of Aerospace Sciences and Strategic Studies. So, Ms. Sheza, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha. So I will be covering the superiority in hypersonics. Initially, I will be talking about what are the motivations for different actors to pursue this field, and secondly, I will be talking about its impact on the strategic stability. So we are all aware that hypersonics have emerged. Their relevance is increasing in warfare with time, and the reason for that is certain factors which include speed and increasing maneuverability, increased range, and increased survivability. In addition, we see that it is nearly impossible to detect and engage hypersonic weapons. So all these factors, when we look at them through one's lens, we see that these factors are pushing a number of states, particularly the major powers, to make advancements in hypersonic field. So we see Russia, China, and USA making considerable investment in this field. So if we talk about Russia, what are the motivation for Russia to pursue this field? We see that in 2002, when USA withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile treaty, and also it showed its intent to have a missile shield in Eastern Europe, that was the point which was extremely concerning for Russia, because unconstrained US missile defenses, they provided a legitimization for Russia to pursue its hypersonic ambitions. We also see that in the changing geopolitical environment, Russia's pursuit of hypersonic weapons can also be seen as one of the signals to NATO countries that NATO will not be able to protect you. It aims to expose the security guarantees that is provided by the United States to those countries. And Russia, through building up such technologies, it wants to deter the alliance from confronting Russian aggression. And the third reason that Russia might be pursuing hypersonic weapons is, again, which we all are aware of, that in order to assert itself to assert its major power state. So coming towards China, we see that China we see, again, as mentioned by Amna, we see the great power rivalry intensifying. We see that China is being contained by the United States of America through allies and through the increasing presence of US in the region. So when you are actually provoking China, it is not it's not surprising that China is now is seen diverting from its previous uh, military doctrines, and it's now emerging. It's solidifying its army, its navy, and its air force. And the signal is both towards US and towards its allies that there's a limit to which these ambitions, these aggressive ambitions, will be tolerated. So by building up such weapons, China wants to signal that if there is an escalation, you might want to rethink about it twice, because the cost that will be able that will be there will not be uh, will not you will not be able to sustain it. And then we talk about United States of America. One reason for United States of America to pursue this technology is obviously because Russia and China are uh, going after this technology. So simultaneously, it wants to deter its adversaries and uh, it wants to deter its adversaries and reassure its allies through such technology. The second reason why US wants superiority in hypersonic technology is the reason that it has the access and resources to pursue this technology. So, and it does not want, like any other major power, it does not want to lag behind in this space. And thirdly, which I think this is a reason which is also valid for both Russia and China, is that even the United States is well aware that this technology, there will be a time when it will be of serious concern for the global community, because and there will come a time when you will need to negotiate. And in order to negotiate from a position of relative strength, you need a sizable amount of this technology itself. So this condition applies to all USA, China, and Russia. That when a time comes when you want to negotiate of how you want to regulate or control this technology, you should be negotiating from a position of relative strength. Now, if we talk about the region of, if we narrow down to the region of South Asia, this region is equally relevant and important as far as the uh, hypersonic technology is concerned, because of two factors. One, because this region is always caught in the great power competition, and number two, it's India's hypersonic ambitions, which we have seen that India is inclined to develop this technology, to acquire this technology. So, and what are the reasons for India to opt for this technology? One, it's the realist hegemonic aspirations of India. We see that India, it wants to project itself as one of the major powers in the world. And that is the reason why it's pushing so hard in its military. And it wants to somehow project that it is able to not only become a regional power, but also a global power. So that is one of the reasons that India is after this technology. The second reason is China. We see China making progress in this technology, and obviously India sees China as one of the states which obviously it is trying to contain. It is the only Quad member which shares a border with China, so it aims to balance its capabilities with China, and that is one of the reasons that India is after this technology. And third reason, which is again of concern for us as well, it's Pakistan. With regards to Pakistan, we can say that one of the reasons why one of the areas where it aims to use them, or not use them, but have them, is it wants to have a strategic deterrence in the form of hypersonics against Pakistan to deter it. And secondly, we can say that in a limited aerial operation, we see the Hindutva-inspired regime under Prime Minister Modi. So it is obviously very dangerous, but we cannot rule out these possibilities that India can, in future scenarios, use hypersonics in aerial operations again across the border. And the third reason is, which we see, is that the Indian Coast Guard doctrine. And with the help of hypersonic weapons, India aims to strengthen that doctrine. And what we see in that regard is how that is applicable is that through targeting Pakistan's tactical assets. So, these are the developments that are taking place around the globe at the global level and as well as the regional level. So now, where do we go from here? What are the implications that these developments are going to have on the strategic stability? So hypersonic weapons, they represent a security challenge for at both at global and regional level. They, even though they appear some up to right now for the major powers, they are appearing as a source of stability, but in the longer run, they are going to give rise to more security dilemma. So, and if we talk about its impact on strategic stability, we can analyze it through three lenses. One is deterrence, the other is arms race, and which brings us to the crisis stability. So, if we talk about deterrence, if we look at the global level, the introduction of this technology is going to have an adversarial impact on the deterrence. We see Russia and China reinforcing their capabilities with this technology to manipulate US behavior in order to uh, convey it to the United States of America that its global ambitions are not going to be tolerated by the respective countries. And ultimately, what it does is that both sides will be in a situation where they want to build more and more weapons, and they're not convinced that they are in a state where both of them are in a balance of power. Rather, it will appear as constantly there's a shift in the strategic balance, and all the three sides will ultimately invest in offsetting the offset in that balance. So that is again a destabilizing factor, and which will ultimately lead us to an arms race. We see at the global level, you are already seeing that China, US, and Russia, they are already involved in an arms race. We recently saw China testing its hypersonic weapon. Russia, we are all aware that it's the leader, and it has shown its ambitions to have. All three of them have shown their ambitions to excel in technology. And then recently we have seen that this technology, it did existed for a long time, but recently the rate at which it's accelerating has burgeoned, and the reason for that is that all three states, they want to overtake one and the other in this level. And if we analyze it at a regional level, we see that since India is investing in BrahMos, and already it has invested a lot in subsonic assets. So we see that it is investing, it has shown its ambition in hypersonic vessels, it is, and since it will be, if it acquires the systems, that it will put pressure on Pakistan as well. And Pakistan will also have to take measures to counterbalance this act, not by choice, but by compulsion, because this puts immense pressure on Pakistan as well, because we have to balance the strategic stability over here. But I would like to, this is a matter of concern for us, but I would just like to mention here that it is a matter of concern, but we should also keep this in mind that acquiring a weapon is one thing, and how you use it is another thing. How you employ it, how you're going to have the concept of employment, how you actually use it in a conflict, that is another thing. So we need to be cognizant of this fact simultaneously. And now, if we talk about the crisis stability, so the mere possession of these weapons can let leaders escalate a conflict. And if we talk about our region, particularly South Asia, we see that the kind of leadership that we have across the border, they are not hesitant to let a conflict escalate. So that is, for our region, it is extremely destabilizing as well, considering the nature of regime who have a great attraction to take anti-Pakistan steps. And on the global level, it's dangerous as well because of the unpredictable behavior associated with the hypersonic weapons, and which is because of the miscommunication and misinterpretation. And another thing, which is the war, we have the ambiguity that is associated with this technology. We see warhead ambiguity, that is, you do not know whether the hypersonic is nuclear capable or conventional, and the time that is available is extremely less. So the response time is very less, and you do not know whether it's conventional or nuclear. and which is again a very dangerous kind of situation. And secondly, the second thing which is equally concerning is the target ambiguity. That even if it's not nuclear tipped, even if it's conventional warhead, still you do not know what the target is, because if the target is, let's say, the command and communication centers, then that is equally worrying, because and in certain cases what worsens the situation is that, for instance, for China and Russia, their conventional and nuclear missiles are under the same command and control. So this entanglement further exacerbates the situation for these weapons. And when we talk about Amna previously has mentioned about emerging technologies, where we also have to consider that we see artificial intelligence, we see hypersonic weapons. If there's a fusion of these technologies, because like I mentioned, the response time is extremely less. So in a situation where you do not know whether the whether it's a conventional warhead or a nuclear warhead, there obviously at now it seems beyond our scope, but ultimately there can be a time when the military leaders are forced to to have the military planning up to the machine. They let the machines decide because of the immense pressure that is offered because of the lesser response time. So that is something which is very worrisome, because if you allow algorithms to decide, and those are the algorithms that are learning to program themselves, then it can lead to unwanted escalations, which may be beyond our imagination. So to conclude, I would just like to say that again, this technology will bring a whole new dimension in warfare, and it is going to have a great impact on strategic stability of the region as well as group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shaza. That was quite insightful, and the way you have furthered this argument that how technologies are important and what impact can they have for international politics, and they always have their considerable impact on international politics and of course vis-a-vis geopolitics and geopolitical strategic stability. So in this case, you have talked about acquiring of parity among various of these emerging technological powers, and how that parity, if it's acquired, how it can affect the global order, and then also its impact and manifestations for South Asian strategic stability. The way you have factored that in, that's incredible. That was very insightful. So thank you so much, and especially the framework of deterrence. That how does technological precipice they intervene into this development for peacetime, also for crisis, and then consequently for war. How does this work, and what can be the consequences for that? So wonderful, thank you so much. So furthering this argument, we would move on to our next participant, which is Mr. Shayan Jami from the department. So Shayan, whenever you're ready, go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I just want to start off by thanking Dr. Adil, Madam Aiza, and Ma'am Aisha for giving me the chance to speak on this very important topic. And I believe AI is very important because it's going to be the defining technology of the future. And I mean the defining technology. If you look at history, the Cold War, so the nuclear technology was very important then. It was defining, and it still is today. So I believe AI is going to play a very similar role. So thank you for the opportunity. And I also want to acknowledge Ma'am Amna and Ma'am Shaza for their very detailed and thorough presentations. I think they've made my job a bit easier, so thank you. Okay, so I'll divide my time into a few parts. Before we go to the topic at hand, which is AI as a force multiplier, I want to spend some time and just define the concept of AI, because there's a lot of confusion about this. There are a lot of different definitions going around. So I'll just sort of differentiate between what is AI and what isn't AI. And I know that a lot of the audience is, has a non-technical background. So I'll keep it as simple and as non-technical as possible, so you guys can follow along. Okay, so don't worry. And I'll give you some examples as well, because people think that AI is going to happen 20, 30 years from now, but it's very much happening here and now, today. So there are lots of current examples I can give you about that. So I'll move on to the topic at hand after that, which is artificial intelligence as a force multiplier. So I'll sort of look at why AI is going to be so important, why I think so it's going to be so important, and essentially how it can enhance the technology, the capabilities you already have. So I'll go into that, and I'll give you an overview of sort of which states are leading, which Amna and Shaza have already touched upon, but I'll sort of go in detail in terms of AI. And I'll focus on the US and China mostly, but I'll go into other states like Russia and Israel as well. So we look at that. And then I'll end off by sort of going into the implications that already have been touched upon, but I'll go into that more detailed as well. Okay. So first of all, what is AI? That's the big question. Because I think most people, when they think about the word AI, their mind goes to these sort of science fiction robots, like in movies like The Matrix or Terminator. That's the first thing that comes to their mind. Like Amna mentioned, lethal autonomous weapon systems, and these are a very real possibility for sure. They're a reality. They're going to happen eventually. But I want to emphasize that AI is so much more than just robots. And personally, I wouldn't really categorize AI as a technology. Rather, I would say that it's more of a way to improve upon current technology. So, Shaza mentioned hypersonic missiles. Amna mentioned, cyber, space, different. So AI is a way to improve on these technologies. And I'll explain more, with examples as we go on. But if I was to give a very, very basic definition, I would say that AI is a machine that displays intelligence without direct human control. And a very basic example is self-driving cars. Okay, so think of a simple car. It's a machine, yes, but it's controlled by human actions. So if I'm driving, I press the race pedal, it'll go forward. I press the brake, it will stop. So a human is controlling this. But now think about self-driving cars, which use AI to function. And they're becoming more and more common in countries like the US and China. Like a Tesla car, for example. Tesla is becoming more and more common. Now, the way this car works is that when it's manufactured, when the parts are put together, yes, there's hardware, there are tires, there's an engine, but an extra part is added to it called the software. And you may have heard this word, Shaza even mentioned software, algorithm, or even code. These words mean the same thing. And they're just big words to confuse you. It's a very simple thing. Basically, it means instructions. So they're programmers whose job it is to sort of train the AI of the Tesla to act in certain scenarios. So for example, if you're driving a Tesla and you put it on autopilot mode, essentially what it's going to do is it will drive, and if it sees an obstacle on the road, let's say, then it will revert to its memory and will say, I have been trained in this scenario to act in a certain way. So it will slow down, it will move away from the obstacle and drive away because it has been trained to do so. So if you want to understand the concept of AI, you can kind of equate it with a child even, that when a child is growing up, it notes the patterns, it copies people around it, and it learns more and more as it goes along. So I think a good way to understand AI is to say that AI is essentially a way for a robot or a machine to mimic humans. So I think that's a very basic example. And essentially, that's a very basic example of AI. We look at more complex examples as we go along. But if we go back to the definition at hand, which was a machine that shows intelligence without human control. Now, in this case, the Tesla is a machine. Yes, it drives itself. It sees an obstacle. And with intelligence, it sort of acts in a way a human would. So that's what AI is in a very short time span, that it's sort of a way to mimic humans. Okay. So now we have the basic definition out of hand. We can go towards the topic, which is AI as a force multiplier. How does AI enhance your resources? So I gave one example of the Tesla car, but that's just one example in one industry. AI has the capacity to be a game changer in so many industries, from healthcare to finance, social media, entertainment, and so many more. And we'll go towards that more, but I think for us, we should focus more towards the military side of things and the sort of technological edge that one country gets over another when they acquire AI and they implement it in their military. So first of all, also, I think history is our best friend here. If we go to history and we see the sort of role that technology has played in shaping a country's progress or guiding where the global competition or the global environment is going towards. Look at gunpowder. Look at Industrial Revolution. When these sort of technological advancements came about, and they were converted from technology to a military angle, then that's really when that country or those empires really progressed and they spread their influence around the world. So I want to look at AI through kind of the same lens about what kind of change it will bring about militarily. So I think a great example would be Israel's operation against Hamas, which actually happened earlier of this year in May 2021. And this operation was dubbed as the world's first AI war. And it's very interesting. I think if you guys have time after this, just look it up on Google. It's very interesting. So in this operation, Israel used AI in a number of ways. First of all, they essentially had a swarm of drones. So they sent these drones that had AI in them to Palestine territory, and they were able to map the area with ease. They could basically see the buildings, they could see where the people were. So in a way, they were able to analyze the data on potential targets. And this data was used to guide the military commanders on the best possible course of action. So essentially, they were able to carry out the best possible operation with the least possible casualties. And that's what AI and computers are known for their speed, for their efficiency. And in fact, Israel's Iron Dome, which is actually an autonomous defense system, which uses AI algorithms, it was able to stop 95% of Hamas missiles that were fired. So just think about that for a second. Hamas fired about 200 missiles into Israeli territory, and only about 10 got through. And this is a very early version of the Iron Dome. Imagine 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this could be 100% accurate. It could be 99% accurate. It could really give Israel an advantage. They already have an advantage, but even a greater advantage. And after this operation, an Israel senior officer even mentioned that AI played a role as a force multiplier. So I think it's very clear to see that what role AI can play, not just robotics, not just soldiers on the ground or these drones, but to better analyze the situation, to better help the commanders understand what the best possible course of action is, essentially. And in all aspects, I think this is multiplication of their force. This is increasing their capacity, their ability, and much more than their opponents who don't have AI. So I think that's important to understand that it's not just robots. It helps to multiply your forces in different areas. And I also want to point out that I'm mentioning analyzing data. So this isn't like a small amount of data. These are large amounts of data that would take human beings about months or even years to go through. But with AI, with an effective AI, it can go through this data in a matter of seconds or even minutes. So that's the power of AI. In this example, Israel used drones, and they could really map the area in real time. They could really sense that okay, this building is a bit weak. There are more people here. We should attack in this area. So it's easy how you can sense how it plays a role as a force multiplier. And if I'm to give my personal opinion, I think this is how warfare will be fought in the future. That countries that have AI will use it, in these sorts of ways to have a tremendous advantage over their rivals. So that's a bit of AI as a force multiplier. I want to focus a bit. I want to focus a bit on which states are sort of leading the way at the moment, and what plans they made for the future. And I've done my research, but it doesn't take an expert to know that it's the US and China, like Amna and Shaza have mentioned. So let's take a look at China first. China is actually making a lot of progress. A few years ago, in 2017 or 18, I believe, they released their national AI plan, national AI strategy. And they had some very, very strong words in this. First of all, they identified the year 2030 as a very pivotal year for them in terms of AI. So China wants to be the global AI leader by 2030. They want to have an industry of 150 billion when it comes to AI by 2030. And they also want to sort of identify ethical standards for the use of AI. So all this language is pointing towards, China wanting to be a global leader. They want to sort of set the trend for others to follow. And it's also important to put this into context. China's brand strategy, their 2049 plan, they want to be a global superpower by the year 2049. They want to sort of surpass the US, or at least be on par with the US by then. And this plan of 2030 for AI is very, very pivotal for that. As I mentioned, that technology can easily be transferred to military, even the economy, the politics. So it's very important to remember that these plans are essentially linked for them, the technology and their grand plan. And China has made some tremendous advancements in areas like AI for sure, and drones, robotics, 5G, we all know. And as I mentioned, that AI is going to play a role essentially in enhancing these technologies. So think about any technology. If it has software in it, then AI can improve it easily. So that's China. Russia as well. Russia has some very similar goals for 2030. They've identified certain milestones for these years. And Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, famously said that whoever leads the world in AI will rule the world. So again, some very, very strong words from both China and Russia, sort of showing that these countries know that AI is so important, and they know that the military angle is also important for that. Now, the US has responded quite strongly as well. Earlier this year, in March, I believe, there was a report by the National Security Commission on AI, which is a US Congress created body. And again, some very strong words. First of all, this report identified China and Russia, but mainly China, as the biggest threat to US supremacy. And they essentially said that China is going to go ahead of the US in AI. And if the US doesn't act soon, it can be replaced as a global leader by China. So some very strong words which we really haven't heard before from the US. And this report made some very strong recommendations as well. One of them was that the Pentagon increased the AI budget from about 1.5 billion per year to 8 billion per year in a matter of years. And that's a very big jump, more than 4 times the jump. And the US, it also recommended the US military implement AI throughout its ranks. Like I mentioned, the example of Israel, in command and control, to analyze data, different scenarios. So I think it's clear the trend that that's happening in terms of AI. China, Russia, the US are all aware that AI is going to play a big role in the future, and they have to adopt this. I think also it's important to sort of put into perspective the global competition between the US and China right now, which is happening in different areas, militarily, economically, politically. There's a lot of, essentially, you could say it's a second Cold War. And this is happening in the technological area as well. But first, just to sort of paint a picture, China, as I mentioned, have a plan for 2049. They want to be a global superpower. As Shaza and Amna mentioned as well, the US wants to contain them. So they basically have an Indo-Pacific strategy in which they want to contain China and build alliances in that area. So it's clear that there's a clash of heads going on. And this competition in AI especially is for sure going to have a spillover effect to other states. Other states will follow what these superpowers are doing, and they are already investing more and more in AI. And I mentioned Israel, EU as well, the European Union states, they're investing a lot. India is also starting to invest a lot. So there's a very clear trend that's sort of going along. And one point I also want to mention is I said that China wants to have a $150 billion industry by 2030. Now they don't mention that it's military. They just want an AI industry. But another very important point is when it comes to AI, civilian technology can be very easily be transferred or sort of converted into military technology. The same way when you had nuclear technology, it could be used for peaceful purposes and for military purposes. So it's not that difficult to convert them. If you look at facial recognition technology, all of our phones, we have that technology, but it can easily be converted into military uses for surveillance, for other analysis purposes. So, these come hand in hand, civilian and military technology. Okay, so I mentioned the states, I mentioned sort of the overall environment. Now I want to conclude by just going towards the implications. And a lot of these Amna and Shaza have already mentioned, so I'll keep it brief over here. But just, I want to make clear that there are going to be some very, very big implications, in my opinion, because AI is completely going to change the way society works, the world works, but I'll focus on the military right now. So first of all, Shaza mentioned the nature of warfare will change. Yes, I believe so as well. The way I mentioned in the example of Israel, that these commanders essentially used AI to assist them, not directly, it wasn't directly a part of the chain of command, but it was used to assist them. But it's very possible in the future that AI could become a direct part of that chain of command because AI is faster, it's more efficient. So what's stopping a military commander to say that I would like AI to be to have a direct role in the chain of command? And this brings about some very interesting ethical questions and philosophical questions as well. That if you replace human beings with AI, so is that the element of empathy, emotion is taken away? So these sort of problems are going to arise in the future that we can't even imagine right now. Think of nuclear technology. We had deterrence, mutually assured destruction. These problems arose after that technology became commonplace. So there are lots of questions we don't even know right now that will arise. But for sure, the nature of warfare will change. You will even have robot soldiers for sure on the ground. Who knows? It's a very real possibility. Secondly, again, it's already been mentioned, but I'll go to the AI arms race. And the spread of AI is going to be a lot easier than hardware, because AI isn't a tangible element. It's just software. It's digital. So it's not that difficult to transport it from one area to another area. It's not like a nuclear power plant where you have to get scientists, you have to move equipment and everything. Obviously, there's a hardware element to AI, but the main element is software. So spreading to both state and non-state actors, it's very simple. It's very easy. And I would bet that it's going to be a problem in the future. And lastly, I would just like to conclude with one point of that I mentioned before, that when states acquire technology throughout history, we've seen there's a very big gap between those that have that technology and those that don't. And so I think the same is going to occur with AI, that AI enabled states will have such a big military advantage over the other states that this is going to transfer to their political side as well. They'll have more influence politically. They'll have more economic power as well. So I think that's an important point to take into account. And just like one final parting word that I would like to say is that this is a very defining moment in human history. We've been through different revolutions. We've been through agricultural revolution, industrial, technological. We are now in the midst of the AI revolution, and it's very much started. Yes, I believe so. So I think it's very important that we embrace this and we understand what problems could arise from it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shayan. That was very interesting. That added up another dynamic to this whole debate of emerging technologies and its impact on strategic stability. So you see, you discussed China here, and the way you simplified AI for us for the understanding of laymen of international relations, which are not really into understanding artificial intelligence and the role it's playing for challenging the strategic stability. So great job there. And the way you elaborated that how China is improving on it, and as a matter of fact, China has introduced this scheme, which you also discussed, the AI 2.0 scheme, which is a 15 years plan, and they introduced it in 2017. And through that, they are really, and towards concluding, you talked about the normative side of this development, the AI development, that how normativity would be disturbed, and how rural life and agricultural life is challenged basically in China, and how it is impacting the migration patterns, and then naturally to urbanization plans and developmental plans. So this is absolutely a trickle down effect. Because China is producing a big chunk of sovereign wealth fund, and that sovereign wealth fund is invested in AI, which is producing the AI intelligence, the big data intelligence, the hybrid intelligence, and they are really taking people out from the rural development, and they are making these big swarms, big data farms, where they are recruiting people which basically were involved in rural development, and that's why the rural development in China is harmed, and that challenge is again is being thought of transferring to other parts of the world where China's sovereign wealth fund is under investment, and it is investing in AI in other parts of the world as well. So wonderful normative pattern and this dynamic which you touched upon. So amazing job. So we have received a number of questions for the panelists, and with your consent, I would like to go forward, but I would appreciate if the person who wants to ask question, if we could unmute them and they could ask the question themselves. Is that possible for us? So the first
yes, that would be possible. Do you want me to do that?
I'm going ahead. I have identified Faraz here. So Faraz, are you here? I have given you the permission to talk. Okay, so Faraz's audio is not working.
Hello. Is that directed towards me?
No, I said Faraz. Farhan Ahmed Sab. I asked for Faraz. So if you have a question, please go ahead. I can read Faraz's question second. If you want to go ahead, Farhan Ahmed Sahab.
Gee, it was nice learning, nice hearing from you. And I am a CEO of a company, and we are basically venturing into AI technologies. And I would like to chip in with a word or two on how this AI has evolved. All of you have elaborately mentioned the concept behind AI, but there's one thing which needs to be noted here, and that is that there are three areas in which you need to master in in order to be able to develop any AI system. Number one is the mathematics behind it. Uh, there are a lot of maths, probability, and other things, which basically forms the bedroot for any application of AI. And number two is the computer science. And of course, a lot of software and hardware has come into it. Mostly it's computer science is related to softwares, and we have to be master of all the latest programming techniques and languages like Python and R. And number three is the domain knowledge. Like Shayan was mentioning, that if you want to implement AI into vehicles, then you have to have people who understand the vehicles. Similarly, if you want to integrate AI into, let's say, nuclear warfare, then you have to have people who understand nuclear warfare. So domain knowledge is very important to have, and that is where we would require people like yourself who have domain knowledge of certain area, and other people's having domain knowledge of their own people who could then come together with people who have knowledge of expertise in computer science and maths to come up with an expert system which can be used for artificial intelligence. So that expert system needs all these ingredients I have mentioned. And how we have come to this place is that over the last 60 years, the hardware was making quite a revolution and software was lacking behind. The digitization that started about 60 years with the invention of the chip, then led to microprocessors, which led to the computers, revolution in communication through optical fiber, satellites, and wireless. And then we have this information and communication technology. So they matured to this level that the hardware went real ahead and software was slightly lacking behind, that it could not fully utilize that computing power that we had achieved through these very high computing machines. Then came our big data, normal data and big data, and data itself led to information. And that information is then used to accrue knowledge. So basically, you want to have knowledge about certain domain for which you need to have some information to infer that knowledge from, and for that information, you need to have some data. And that data is now defined by big data, where you have very high velocity, very variable, very vast amount of data available to you. So software has come up. This big data utilization has come up through the use of these new machine learning or AI applications. So the marriage of these two streams, high computing power in the computers and the high computing software for the analysis of the big data, has really brought about the AI revolution. And now we see its manifestation in so many forms that you all have so elaborately put together. So my uh, final request or final statement would be that we need to educate our people not only on the importance of AI, but also on the requirements that it requires, both in terms of hardware and the knowledge base that we need to develop in our curriculum, in our universities, in our schools. There was a definition in BBC that today When you talk about a literate person, it means a person who can use a computer. That defines literacy. And secondly, if you want to teach a skill to any uh, young person or a student, it has to be the coding skill, the software coding skill. The languages that they need to learn today are not the linguistic languages that we use, but instead the languages of the computer, be it any language. So these are the two areas in which we need to focus and emphasize upon as much as possible for us as a nation, as a country, to be able to harness the power of AI in the future. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, well said. Thank you so much, Mr. Farhan Ahmed. And absolutely, we totally believe in this. And I would also like Dr. Adil to comment something on it. Uh, Sir, if you may, or can we do it later?
Yeah, we can do it later. Maybe
Okay.
the number of questions you can
Can I
get.
add one point? Could I add a point to Sir Farhan Saab's statement?
Sure, of course.
So I would agree I would agree with Farhan Saab that we need to have a strong technological base. If you look at the US, look at Silicon Valley. So it's a very vibrant environment where it encourages, these sort of technological, creativity, technological advancements. So I think if you look at Pakistan, we're obviously far behind that, but we need to go towards that a bit. We need to have a vibrant economy in terms of these technological advancements. And he's right that we have to teach our students, these languages, because they're now becoming the new, the new French, the new English, it's essentially the new language. So I would agree with his point.
Yeah, absolutely. Data sciences is what we really need to integrate with strategic studies, with international relations, with political science, because that's the need of the time. So moving on towards the questions, for us, if you can hear me, please go ahead with your question. Faraz, if the issue is being resolved, go ahead, please. Okay, I think that Faraz is encountering some problem with the mute button. Just quickly.
Yeah, Faraz is here now.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it was the attendee role issue. So I had about 3 questions, one from each panelist. I'll ask Ms. Amna first. So my question is, do you see a role of emerging technologies in soothing the potentially intensifying rivalry that we see between the US and China? I mean, we know that it's a factor for exacerbating this rivalry and adding to it, but do you think that can we find some areas that can maybe help both of these countries to maybe converge on some point and rivalry between these two countries?
Faraz, we have lost you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Did my audio get cut?
Yeah, it's right now. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Okay. So my question is to Ms. Amna. Do you see a role of emerging technologies in soothing the intensifying rivalry between US and China? Can it have some sort of a positive influence in this competition between these countries?
I think you should ask all the questions and then we will answer all these questions.
Okay. Okay, so the second question was to Ms. Sheza. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Each country, these large powers, US, Russia, and China, they will try to be more competent in hypersonic weapons so that when it comes time, they will negotiate from a position of strength. To me, this process of achieving that competency seems kind of dangerous, at least in my view. So I wanted your opinion on whether this process of achieving that competency will result in some sort of limited conflict, maybe mini hot wars between US and China. So I wanted your opinion on that. And the third question was to Cheyenne. The question was that the increasing integration of AI in so many things, as you mentioned, especially in the military warfare, arms capabilities, hypersonic missiles or the lethal autonomous, like the robot kind of stuff. This inclusion, on the surface seems dangerous, but could you, from your expertise, shed some light on how it could be a positive thing? How can it be a helpful thing if there is that positive aspect to it? So yeah, those are the three questions. Thank you.
Okay, could I go first?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. Regarding the role of emerging technologies to diffuse this emerging conflict between the great powers, and especially US and China, I really want you to look at the Cold War scenario, like the time, especially the development of the nuclear technologies and the way great powers developed the global regime for the nuclear technology. While all the great powers were at that time developing the nuclear weapons, first was there was no debate, and there was a great element of secrecy and the privacy. And first, when US achieved this capability, definitely it got an upper hand as on the all other powers. And the states kept on developing this nuclear technology, and once they reach at the higher level of the development, where like Shahza already mentioned this aspect, that the development of those weapons would give you an upper edge whenever you start a negotiation process or start developing a global regulatory regime or the global norms for these weapon systems. So every state was pursuing that higher goal. So once they achieved that balance of power, and then they started engaging in the negotiations regarding the nuclear weapons. So the main objective at that time was to acquire the supremacy, technological supremacy. Second development that led to the development of or the designing of this global regime and diffusing tensions between two superpowers at that time, Soviet Union and US, was that the technology reached that higher level of development where it became a threat to the existence of humanity. So nuclear powers, like it was the concept of the mutually assured destruction, and once they will start a nuclear war, then there will be an all-out destructions, and the humanity would cease to exist. So in my opinion, right now, states vis-a-vis emerging technologies, all these great powers are in an arms race where they are trying to achieve the supremacy. And once they achieve that balance of technological advancement, then they will start negotiating on these technologies. And there might come a point in future where all these technologies, which I think they call it a technological or the global zero, where all these technologies will completely destroy or replace, like Cheyenne talked about the killer robots or these robot soldiers. So there is a school of thought that believes that in future there will come a point when all these robots will replace the humanity. It is just a mere assumption, but you can imagine that until we reach that point where all these emerging technologies become a threat to the existence of human, then I think that was the stage where states would realize this threat, and they will stop for the development, or they develop a kind of a regime to regulate these technologies. So as we said, no technology itself is a neutral. So it's about the human intentions. It's about the human ambitions that made these technologies positive or the negative. So even right now, the states can use these technology for peace and development, but they are not. In the last few months, I have read a lot of documents where I have clearly seen that there is a strict language. Cheyenne also mentioned that you can clearly see a very uncompromising positions regarding the emerging technologies, and from all there is a prominent shift in doctrines and strategies, and the policy level. You can see now US said that now terrorism is no longer an issue, and we will now focus on the containment of the China, and the biggest advantage China right now have is in the field of the emerging technologies. So right now, I don't see that emerging technologies in some way diffuse these tensions until or unless all these states reach a certain balance of power, or the technological supremacy, or these technologies develop to an extent where they become a threat to the human existence. So that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Ms. Amna. That was quite detailed and informative. So moving on to next participant, whoever wants to respond for, yes, Ms. Shaza, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for your question. So regarding on how will this competition, will it lead to instability or hot wars, as you have mentioned? So what I would, my opinion on this is that technology takes time. Every technology needs time to refine itself. So, and since we're talking about hypersonics, we see that now, if we talk about the near future, I don't see a conflict between US and China because of the potential negative impacts that it will bear along with it. I think this is also, we are all aware that it will be understood by the leadership of the respective countries as well, that this is a technology that it can bring disastrous impact. So if you talk about in the near future, I don't see an armed conflict in the two countries because of their obvious impact. But if you talk about the later run, we have to see how this technology over the time shapes itself, and what is the pace of the development of this technology. Because, for instance, just to as an example, we see India, BrahMos, the development of BrahMos, we've seen it's been talked since a decade or so. But we have seen that repeatedly they have to extend the timeline. So again, it's a matter of time. This will become more clear as we go ahead, and ultimately, but for now, I don't see a direct conflict between US and China. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Cheyenne, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, Faraz asked another question as well to me, so I can respond to that. So he asked about the positive side of AI, essentially, that in terms of these, hypersonic missiles or lethal autonomous weapon systems, what is the sort of positive side? And that's a very good question, because at the moment, there's a deadlock sort of in terms of the international discussion on the positive and negative side. Some states say that we should ban these weapons, like Pakistan. Pakistan has a stance that we should ban all AI robots, lethal autonomous weapons. Other states like the US and China, they have different views on this. They actually say that these will bring about a positive change in the future. For example, one of these is that human life will be preserved. Essentially, if it's these robots and these autonomous weapons fighting the wars, then the humans will stay at home and they'll be more safe. So that's one. And otherwise, I mentioned that they're more faster, they're more efficient, And I don't, when I say more, I don't just mean a little bit. More means a lot, 100 times, 1,000 times faster. So there's a lot of positive sides. And that's why states like the US and China and others, they are advocating for AI in warfare, in lots of different areas. So for sure, there's a lot of positive aspects. So yeah.
Thank you, Shayan. So we have a hand raised from Ms. Aiza Azam. So Ms. Aiza, if you could hear us, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Am I audible?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Aisha. Thanks everyone for such fantastic presentations. I actually had a lot of midterms to check, but I think this was so interesting that I got carried away and I didn't move on. So I have a couple of questions. Shayan, about your presentation. So very briefly, do you think that if you can shed some light on whether artificial intelligence could potentially endanger nuclear deterrence in the future, how big of a threat do you think this might be? And secondly, this is for all the panelists, anyone can answer. We've been talking quite a bit about, a dreaded future where AI takes over. And I'm actually young enough to remember when Terminator 2 came out. And I think if the robots look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be fine. But on a serious note, the question is that, so last month you had the ex-Pentagon software chief. He came out, he resigned because he felt that the Pentagon was not keeping pace with the US space of, with the Chinese space of development. Specifically in terms of artificial intelligence. And he said that the US has lost the AI battle to China. The race is over. So do you, the panelists, do you feel that this fact that China has gained a substantive edge, according to US experts, do you think that this is going to exacerbate tensions between the two of them, or is it going to lead to some kind of cooperative engagement?
Please go ahead.
Right. So for the first question, in terms of nuclear deterrence, I can only give my own prediction for it because obviously we don't know yet. But for sure, I mentioned the chain of command. It's very possible in the future that AI has a direct, role in the chain of command. So it could be possible that that there's some sort of standoff between two states, and a human being might not react in a certain way, but an AI has been programmed to act in certain, ways which might be more efficient. Let's say, for example, if we take an India-Pakistan, it's close to us, so we'll take India-Pakistan standing. So there are certain things that a human being wouldn't do because of emotional reasons. We'll have a certain emotional bias to it. But when it comes to AI, it will not have any emotional bias. It will only look at what is mathematically the best outcome for me and for my country. So essentially, the answer to your question is yes, AI can definitely endanger this deterrence, because even the concept of deterrence isn't really, I don't think it's an efficient concept. It's more of a, sort of a theoretical concept. It doesn't really compute into mathematics. So for sure, I think it's going to be a very big threat. And for the second question, sorry, I forgot that, but I think Amna can start off.
Okay. So what Shayan said, I just want to give a kind of an informal example here. I hope majority of you have seen the drama Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And when there was a war fighting scene at the Siachen Glacier, and there was a discussion or the conversation between a Pakistani soldier, Captain Kashif, and with the Indian soldier. And at that time, the Pakistani soldier said, "Jain, like you can leave." So imagine a robot over there and what that robot would do, because at that time, even despite of the history of animosity between India and Pakistan, there was there was still a human element between these two soldiers, and the human emotions kicked in, and the Pakistani soldier said that you can just drop your weapon and you can leave. So that's the beauty of human emotions, and in the heat of the conflict, these emotions play a huge role. So we have to look in to the level of autonomy we are willing to give to these robots. Regarding the question of, I just completely forgot in that. What was the question, Isa? The second one.
Can you unmute me, Aisha?
You are unmuted. Like
You are unmuted. We can hear you.
So my second, again, very quickly, my second question was that considering that you've got the ex-Pentagon software chief saying, and the US basically accepting that
Okay.
China has got the edge in the AI race,
Yes,
do you think
yes,
this is going to exacerbate tensions or lead to engagement?
Okay, if you look at here, I want to contribute that if you look at the pattern of the technological development China is following right now, there is a concept called the leapfrog development. Leapfrog development means that whenever a country decides to stop developing the technologies which would be relevant in the present time, and they start investing in the technologies which would be critical like after 20 to 25 years. Let's suppose we are talking about the China. Why China got an edge in the artificial intelligence? Because China stopped the development of the technologies which are currently important, and China started investing or developing or conducting research in the artificial intelligence or all other technologies which would be relevant after 2050. And China is not only developing these technologies or developing the hardware or the software component of these technologies, but also China is registering these technologies or acquiring patents of these technologies. If like we can discuss in another detailed sessions, the global game regarding the intellectual property rights is a very critical and very significant. So now there is a threat in US, or you can say there is an insecurity that all those technologies which would be relevant in future or around like after 2050, China got the patents of all those technologies. So when it comes to the global supply chain, whether it's the civilian use or the military use, as China already mentioned, that majority of these emerging technologies, especially artificial intelligence, is a dual-use technology. You can use it in a civilian, you can use it for civilian purposes and as well as for military purposes, and it is really easy to divert from the civilian sector to the military sector. So in my observation is that whatever US is doing it is just a reactive strategy. It is just a damage control. China has already achieved what it really wanted to achieve. That's why you will see there is an anxiety. There is fear in US, but China is very calm and quiet. We don't see that kind of anxiety and tension in China, because China knows that it got the future. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
That's amazing, amazing. So I hope, Isa, your question is answered.
Could I add to that a bit?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
Right. So for sure, like Amna mentioned, that China is definitely on the path to surpassing the US technologically. But I read a report recently, and it sort of compared different areas, hardware, software, different areas, and it said that at the moment the US is still ahead of China in terms of technology, especially in hardware. Supercomputers and chips, sort of these technological terms, they're a bit ahead of China. But China has, it's a very interesting fact that I learned, that a lot of these chips are actually made in Taiwan. Yeah. Like a large portion of these chips are made in Taiwan. I think about 90% of China's hardware, I can't confirm that, but I read it somewhere, was actually made in Taiwan. So if you put this into perspective, and also an important fact was that this article said that by 2028 is when they expect China to surpass the US. So, that's about 6-7 years from now. So I would definitely think that it will exacerbate the situation. And I think Taiwan is going to play a very big role in that. So.
No, actually, those chips which are being built in China, American investors and entrepreneurs are actually bidding for those chips, and they're asking US government to allow those chips to be built or manufactured in China and then imported to USA. So yes, that's a two-way thing, and probably that would maintain a balance because it has a positive side as well. we have to come out of the realist paradigm altogether and look at the other side as well.
Here,
Right.
I also want to add another point, like you mentioned that US is the business community in the US is asking the US government to start building chips over there, but you have to keep this thing in mind that China recently passed a few rules and regulations, and especially when it comes to the technologies and the data, the foreign companies which are investing in China or want to manufacture something in China, they are bound to share all the data and all the know-how with the local partners or the government of the China. So even US allow its the business community to manufacture in China, but that business community could face a lot of legal and technological hurdles in China, and China won't allow them to steal that technology from them.
Yeah, definitely, and that can be a cause for reversal for all that bid which the investors and entrepreneurs are asking for. So very rightly said. So there are a lot many questions, and I have allowed Miss Maria Parvez, Miss Sara Nazir, and Miss Rabia Bashir because they had given their questions in written. So if any of you could hear us and want to go ahead. Yes, Rabia.
Okay. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Dr. Adil Sultan and Ma'am Aisha, for organizing such a wonderful and interesting debate, and very insightful and brilliant views coming from the panelists. So my question is from Shaza Arif. That is, when it comes to nuclear age, hypersonic weapons are completely, you can say that, pointless in nuclear role and dangerous to deterrence even in non-nuclear version. So in that scenario, how do you see the enthusiasm of major powers for the acquisition and competition over them? Thank you.
Okay. I would just say that I don't see their minimal role in the nuclear age because of the fact that when you are tipping up hypersonics with nuclear, when the warhead is nuclear, it can do damage both, either it's conventional or it's nuclear. But again, I would say that their role in the nuclear age is equally relevant. Rather, I would say that it's more dangerous rather even more than the conventional one, because the speed that is given, you are firing a missile that is beyond Mach 5, that is highly maneuverable, and if you consider context such as the South Asia where this distance is so low, it holds great significance in the nuclear age. But yes, with regards to the conventional use as well, the conventional use of hypersonics can do a lot of damage as well, particularly in context like South Asia, where the region, where the distance is very low. So I think, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Shaza.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shaza. Okay, so Ms. Maria or Ms. Sara, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Please go ahead.
Should I go for?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, my question is quite similar to Farah's question. But before asking my question, I want to add a comment on what Shayan said in response to Farah's question. I think whenever a technology is acquired by a state, either it is for peaceful uses, it could be transformed for the military purposes as well. When it comes to its security, we can also take the example from the Cold War era, when US President Eisenhower took the initiative to spread the nuclear technology with the purpose to promote its peaceful uses. I think there is need to limit its military uses of any new technology or any emerging technology. Now coming towards my question, which was directed to Ms. Shaza, that emerging technologies such as hypersonic weapons have increased the chances of conventional war and the possible use of nuclear weapons by making war easier. Don't you think that it can also bring instability, because it can also increase the chances of assured retaliation due to their fast speed and ability to carry nuclear and other conventional payloads? That was my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Please
with-
go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for your question. So, with regards to the retaliation, I would just comment that if you're talking about the receiving side, then I don't think they will get the chance to retaliate, because if you're the country that launches an ICBM, the speed is so high, the speed is so fast that that side, that is one of the main purposes of hypersonic weapons, that they actually remove your second strike capability. So with regards to retaliation, yes, but in terms of preemptive strikes, that can become a major source of instability. I agree, because, for instance, if there are two states, both of them they possess hypersonic weapons, then yes, one of them can preempt, and again that could lead to a major confrontation between both of them.
Yes, I hope the question is answered. Sarah?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Miss Maria Parvez. Maria, if you could hear us, please unmute yourself. Or if Miss Maria is not here, we have received other questions as
no,
well.
No, ma'am, I'm here. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Of course, yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, and we can
Yes,
wait for you. No worries. Go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am. You want to ask me something?
Maria, you asked a question in Q&A section, so I wanted you to ask this question.
No. I didn't ask a question. I just wanted to tell that Itfa is with me. Actually, his battery died. So.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Maria. So we have received other questions as well. That's one from an anonymous attendee. They have not mentioned their name, so I'm going to read the question. And it is directed towards Ms. Shaza. And it says that with the devastations left behind in Japan post Second World War and those of the rest of the globe, the supposed superpowers of the world and even nations like India investing in hypersonic missiles, does it not make the nuclear non-proliferation treaty and the whole purpose of establishing peace via communication impractical? If nations are constantly involved in creating new weapons secretly, how does this impact their relations among one another? So that's a question relating to nuclear non-proliferation and if it is being impacted by the secret weapon development.
Yes, I would agree that that venture it impacts the nuclear era as well. And the thing that has been pointed by the questionnaire is that the channels of communication, there is no room for communication when hypersonics are concerned, because of the fact that till now there are no treaties or rules or regulations that can regulate this technology. Because if we talk about, for instance, if we talk about the Cold War era, there were hotlines, there were communications links and there were treaties as well that allowed what you can say the de-escalation, or what you can say the parity or stability at that time. But with this technology, and states one after the other, they are willing to make advancements in this. But yes, they are overlooking the fact that the increased survivability and speed of this technology, it compromises on the communication links between countries in times, particularly in times of escalation or crisis. So yes, and it will adversely impact the non-proliferation goals of the global community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have another question from someone named AVS. I do not identify the name. That's why I've not unmuted it. So I'm going to read the question. The question is, do you think that AI in the military field could be used for the protection of human lives rather than endanger, probably they mean endanger them, for example, in the form of automatic civilian recognition systems? That's not really directed towards any particular participant. So if any
I can answer.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so Faraz asked a very similar question as well, that what are the sort of positive, impacts? And I mentioned that yes, states like the US and China, and many other states do mention that AI is going to play a very positive role and is going to help humans. But I would ask the question of which humans, if there's a war going on and there are two states, one state has these, robots that saves their own civilians, but I'm sure that it'll also be programmed to target other civilians of the other side, So if you ask this question of which civilian, which side, that's what I was saying, that there are a lot of ethical questions, that are going to come out when it comes to AI. So we really don't know, if it's going to be more positive or more negative. But I'm more of a pessimist, so I would say it's going to be more negative, personally.
Okay, thank you so much, Shayan. So Ms. Zara has also raised a question, and Zara, if you could hear us, and if you want to ask this question, please go ahead, or I shall read it. Okay, probably Zara has some glitches. So it is directed towards Ms. Shaza, and it says that thank you for your insightful talk. My question from you is, how do you see the potential of arms control agreements with regards to hypersonic in the near future?
Thank you, Zara, for your question. So if we look at the moment, we see that none of the superpowers themselves are currently interested in the arms control agreement of hypersonic weapons, because currently all of them are in the race to have superiority in this particular field. So we see that currently we don't see a framework that is in place to have an arms control agreement. And one thing I would like to mention that I would again draw the similarity between the Cold War era and today's world, that today we see a multipolar world with China, Russia, particularly USA. So in a multipolar world, the potential of arms control agreement is going to be even more difficult to develop this technology. And even if somehow there is an arms control agreement over this technology, we will see that there will be states who will somehow acquire this technology one way or another, and there will be loopholes which will again be exploited, particularly by the major powers themselves. So currently, we don't see a framework in the near future merely because of the lack of the global powers themselves. They want to currently invest in this technology. They want to have superiority in this technology, which won't allow them for the time being to have an arms control agreement. But yes, I would stress on that, since you have brought it up, that an arms control agreement over this technology is needed in one form or the other, noting its severe implications. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So these were the questions which were given to us in Q&A section. So if any of you has any question, please come forward. Now is the time to ask questions. I think there aren't any more questions. So Dr. Adil is here with us.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for this wonderful session, for hosting this, and all the panelists. I think it was an excellent session and very refreshing to hear these expert views from the young scholars. I saw a cartoon, I'm sure many of you would have seen that, where one character is asking, are you concerned about the increase in artificial intelligence? The other character is responding, no, I'm more concerned about the decrease in real intelligence. So that's the issue. So what we talked today, all the panelists, I think That was very enlightening. There are so many misconceptions about these issues, about this subject, that we tend to include everything into emerging technologies, as Amna very rightly classified those. How do we see these new technologies? Just few random thoughts on the arms control from the last question. I think Shayan mentioned it about that this AI is will be used in all kinds of technologies, civilian, military, everywhere. So if it is so complex, it's a matrix. So how do you start with arms control? From where do you start? Pick the thread from the arms control. If it includes, it is all encompassing, it is everywhere in all the technologies. So it becomes very problematic. So that's one issue. This is a new debate ongoing. There's lots to understand about these technologies, hypersonics. Like hypersonics, we are so fascinated by hypersonic because India tested it, and we started to evaluate its implications for the strategic stability of South Asia. They are as good as ICBMs or any ballistic missiles. The only difference is they are maneuverable. So if they are maneuverable, they can penetrate into adversaries' defense systems. Since we do not have that kind of a BMD system as India is procuring or other major powers have, so it is not going to make much difference in the near future. But in the long distance, yes. Why it is still important? Because the shock and awe kind of impact the hypersonic weapons could have, even conventional. And for the time being, we are talking about conventional hypersonic weapons because that's what you are achieving out of these weapons is surprise, shock, and awe. Otherwise, there are many other weapons that can serve the same purpose. So we have to understand. We don't have to just so out of this debate, I think the lesson one we can draw is that the future security matrix is going to be very, very complicated. It needs good understanding of needs good understanding of the politics behind it, and it needs good understanding of how to employ these technologies to achieve your certain political objectives and strategic goals and military goals also. So it's going to be a combination. It's not going to be, if you have nuclear weapons, you can deter. No, it's not going to be as simple as that. It's much beyond that. We are talking about the emerging technologies. So on several occasions, some people say, like I think Shan also said, it's a new technological revolution. It will probably surpass the nuclear age. I think every technology has its own merits and demerits. Yes, it is something which can be used, unlike nuclear weapons, because nuclear weapons are primarily for deterrence purpose. Now, these technologies, there are many developing countries. They are far ahead from many advanced countries in terms of computer and AI. So it also narrows the gap between technologically, between the great powers and relatively smaller countries which have advanced technology. So that power gap has been reduced. So it is going to affect balance of power in the future. We don't know how the world is going to emerge, multipolar, non-polar, or any form in that. But traditionally, the main instruments of power, military power, that had been based on the nuclear and the military prowess. Now the technology is also coming the same league. If a smaller country which does not have resources to build nuclear weapons or to acquire prohibited technologies, if they excel in these kind of technologies, so power equation or the power differential is going to be narrowed. So this brings challenges and opportunities also. Countries, those who cannot compete in terms because of their limited resources, financial resources, and mass military power of other countries, they can invest more in these technologies, focus more on these to reduce that gap with your adversary. So not necessarily that what your adversary is doing, you have to, like in military jargon, we used to say the adversary is acquiring certain number of aircraft or the submarines or the ships. So we need to have some balance in that. In this game, you can outclass your adversary. You don't need to go what your adversary is acquiring. You can counterbalance it by other technologies also. Again, it all depends on the skills and the understanding and the employment of these technologies. As very rightly said, these technologies do not have any borders, and they will be everywhere in the civilian, private, government sectors, everywhere. So it makes it more important for the national leadership or the decision makers how to harness these resources and have a meaningful impact at the national level by using all the civil and the military resources I'm talking about. So you don't need to, if the adversary is making hypersonic weapons, not necessarily that you go for hypersonic weapons, there can be many antidotes out of these technologies. But I was more impressed by the conduct of course, my colleague who was the anchor over here, the youngsters. They were very precise in their timing. So you gave them 20 minutes. I don't know whether there was a stopwatch or not. Two of them just stopped at 20 minutes and the other one, couple of minutes. That's very good. I think that's where we should have that kind of discipline also, because that provided us more opportunity for question and answer. And I'm very grateful on behalf of our department and my colleagues for all the students and other participants who stayed here, who participated actively in question and answer session, although I had to push some of the students to get involved in the debate, but others who voluntarily joined this debate. So thank you very much. Thank you, Aisha. Back to you. Thank you for hosting this wonderfully.
Thank you so much to you, sir, actually, for being always objective and encouraging towards the research. And we really feel, privileged.
Yes, sorry, just a last
sure.
point. Anybody who has missed it, we will post this recording on strafasia.com. So this recording would be available because it was, I think it will be useful for other students also who missed this. Thank you. Sorry.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you for the appreciation and actually the willingness of all of our young colleagues, students, ourselves. That counts a lot. And the way you all always come to participate with us and indulge in this debate, whatever topic we provide you and whatever we want to discuss, this elasticity of the platform is really commendable. And thank you so much. That was all from our side. And we would probably be leaving off and the session would continue with Dr. Adil and his students. Thank you so much. Khuda Hafiz.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you. Rest of you can log off. So yeah, we can continue with our class.
Yes, please. Thank you. I really wish we could join the class as well, but okay, we would be signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz. So Dr. Adil, it's for you from here, and I hope that you would also be receiving a recording of this on your computer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Khuda Hafiz.